Hello, this is Audrey, and this is day 22 of the 25 days of Copilots. Believe it or not, we are almost done. The 25th day is coming at us fast. So, in these last few days, I want to show you some special tips and reminders. We also have a surprise for you tomorrow where we're going to do a little pro dev topic as well. But today, I want to remind you of the power of the Chatbot control in Power Apps. So basically, this is not new, right? So that's why I say I'm going to remind you. But it is beneficial when you think about all the Copilots that you saw earlier in the series for Power Apps. So I'm going to bounce over to Power Apps here real quick. Let's just go to Power Apps. We're going to go to the app that this is the app that we use to dig into prompts using AI Builder GPT models. We learned about the out-of-the-box prompts in this app. Then we learned about custom prompts. Then we learned about dynamic values in those custom prompts being as many as you want. But today we're going to talk a little bit more. We did mention earlier in the first 5 days that you do have the app and the maker control. So what do I mean by that? If you insert modern controls and you choose Copilot, this is the app version, which normally it's used by the person consuming the app. So the person who's using the app that's published will use a Copilot in that setting. I think I have a video a little while back where I have an app that collects people's borrowing the company's bicycles. Well, I included a Copilot in that app that would help them to find bike trails, right? So sometimes you want a Copilot in your app, okay? This first type is designed to help you associate data to your Copilot so that the Copilot becomes a specialist on the data source that you have selected, and it generates answers based on that data. Now, it becomes focused on that data. Okay, so you're unlikely to see some of the GPT responses you saw using Azure OpenAI with AI Builder, right? But here you'll see generated responses that are related to the data itself. And so when I do that, now when I run this, as you saw in the early part of the series, this will answer questions about that data. Now, in addition to that, now this, let me see if I can get the properties to pop up. Okay, over here, we see that there's a properties panel. It associated the table that I selected, but I could also select views. Now, the reason I want to tell you about the views is because in Dataverse, it's really easy to have a view that has the table and related columns. So it is a way you could get basically data from more than one table by using a view, right? So, but the goal of this Copilot is to focus on a data source and kind of generate responses directly related to that data source, okay? Then I'm going to delete this one. Then there is the Copilot for the maker, which we looked at, where we just turn on Copilot, which is available in the studio whenever you're in edit mode. And this Copilot maker control will help you add controls to your app, such as screens and buttons. You remember from early in sometime during the first 5 days, we saw that you could even do formulas. It would set up a button to navigate to a different screen, which means it needs to know how to write formulas. So very helpful control. But today, so that was a review of what we already talked about. But today I want to talk about the value of the Chatbot control. Here we are in Copilot Studio, and I have a bunch of Copilots in here, and one of them is a reality check chess supplies Copilot. Now, what is special about this Copilot is that generative AI is turned on, And there are several ways for this Copilot to rely on information to generate responses. So we can add multiple websites. We can actually upload documents. We talked about that earlier, pointing out that this is going to upload that document to Dataverse. So it's going to hit your Dataverse capacity. Then you also have the option, and if you might notice here, it says websites and SharePoint sites. So you can also paste a SharePoint link in there, and then it'll know the difference between a public website and a SharePoint, right? And where you see this more clearly is if you go to the system topics and you open up the conversational boosting and you look at the data sources, you just click edit. And here it'll be separated, the SharePoint sites from the websites, from the Azure OpenAI, from the connection, from the custom data. So you have a lot of options for what we call generative responses based on a repository of sources. There is currently no control, no single control in Power Apps that would do this, right? So what you can do is build out your Copilot in Copilot Studio, then go back to Power Apps. Let me just go back. And now I will check that I'm in the same environment as my Copilot. And then I will insert a control again, only this time it's not a modern control. For now, it's a classic control. And then I'm not going to choose Copilot. This is the thing that I'm so glad I caught myself so you could see how easy it is to misunderstand. You want to search for Chatbot. This is something we've been using for a while, but this is a different control that allows you to connect not just to data sources and connectors and AI Builder and stuff, but this one lets you connect to your Copilots that you built in Copilot Studio. So when I click Chatbot, now I will see all the Copilots in the environment for Copilot Studio. So of course it's looking at the same environment, right? By the way, there's a difference between these two. Reality Check is living in a solution and Pin Concierge is not, but they both show up here. All right. So I'm going to select Reality Check. And now this Copilot is connected to the same, and I know we're calling it Chatbot. And you can definitely give it a different name. And I believe you do it here. Let's see. Yeah, right here. You put the name and that'll change the name that is here. So I'm just going to hit save and then play. This is now, it says Chatbot by default, but if you change the name, it'll say whatever you want it to say. This one will work just like the Copilot that you built in Copilot Studio. And therefore, it's leveraging multiple data sources to generate responses and can even leverage plugins and direct connections. So I think this was worth reminding you of the power of this control because it is uniquely unique from the other controls that you see in Power Apps, which tend to be more focused on a particular task, okay? Whereas this can have multiple sources that can be used for generating responses. And therefore, you can build quite complex bots in Copilot Studio and then bring them into your applications to kick up the value quite a bit for your users. So I wanted to remind you of this capability because I think those of you that used it in the past when Copilot Studio was called Power Virtual Agents, it just didn't have as much as Copilot Studio has today, right? Since its announcement, we have many new options for generative AI responses that didn't exist before, and plugins and integration points and blah, blah, blah. And so maybe this will encourage you to use the chatbot control in Power Apps. And I do encourage you to share what you'd like to do in the Power Apps community or in the in the Copilot Studio community. I'll put links below for both to kind of let us know what it is you would love to do inside of an app using the Copilots that you create in Copilot Studio. And tell us how easy this is for you. I found it extremely easy. And I just thought this is over the top awesome, right? I was very impressed with how this works. So I wanted to share that with you. Another thing I want to point out here that I didn't get to talk about when we talked about this originally is if you include SharePoint data, there's something I'd like you to keep in mind. I already shared that you need to set up security for your users, your internal users, to access, to be able to receive responses based on SharePoint documentation. And I gave you a link to Daniel Christian's video, which explains that beautifully. It's not hard, but there are a few steps and you have to do it in Azure. All right. But in addition to that, there's something I want to remind you to think about. So when you decide which sites, so I'm going to go back to topics. I'm going to open up my topic, which is conversational boosting. And I'm going to click this edit button. And let's say I put 3 SharePoint sites here. Just remember, it's always site. You're not going directly to a library or a list. You're going to a site. And it's able to pick up all the documents of that site. So you could potentially have 4 SharePoint sites, but each site has 50 documents. That's fine, right? But here's what I want you to remember. This is a tip from Audrey to you. Think about the permissions on those libraries, right? So you could have multiple libraries. One library owned by the HR department, another library owned by the IT department, for instance, right? Set the permissions the way you want them. And just remember that the Copilot is going to generate responses for what they can see. All right, so keep that in mind. Do think about who's keeping those documents fresh. Take some time to talk to the stakeholders of the documents you plan to use in your Copilots and see if you can get an agreement on what's our refresh cadence, who's responsible to make sure these documents are accurate, that they don't die in value, and that they're properly permissioned so nobody sees what they shouldn't see, okay? So I suggest you have that conversation. That's kind of like a planning piece I wanted to share with you. Me, myself, coming from the SharePoint world. All right, so I'm going to leave you there for day 22. And I'm going to say, I'm going to see you tomorrow for day 23. We have 2 more days of like scenarios. And then on the 25th, I'll be live to kind of wish you a happy holiday. And if you want to post questions on day 25, you can. But I suggest that everyone goes not to post under the videos for any of us, but to post their questions directly on the community page, which is found at aka.ms, and I'll just go there, aka.ms/25 days of Copilots. If you post your questions here, it's more likely even the engineering teams will catch those questions. So this aggregates all of the days of content, their links, their resources, anything that you can upload yourself, download and then upload into your world is going to be on this page. But on the very bottom, you can like and you can reply to ask questions. And we really would appreciate if you take advantage of this page for that purpose, just so that we can have a single place where engineering can go and kind of see what's happening. So thank you so much. I'll remind you again of that point on the 25th. But in the meantime, I'm going to say good night for today and happy holidays. And I'll see you tomorrow for day 23 of the 25 days of Copilots. Thank you for watching.